Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
William Peterson nodded and glanced at his watch, thinking Kelly hadn't called. Hadn't there been time all day? The night shift had not been easy. 3 surgeries was no joke. The man felt like he was a goner. Abruptly standing up from his chair, he took off his robe, cap and all carefully hung in the locker. Once dressed, he looked around the office once more, corrected the folders with documents. He got up, caught on his cell phone, and went out. Surgeon of the highest category Kotovsky liked it when everything lay neatly in its place. Passing the resident, he shouted to colleagues, "I do not have a quiet duty." And going down the stairs, again looked at the clock. Where's Kelly? The alarm beeped. He was about to open the car door. He was called out of breath, by a nurse. "William Peterson, hold on. There's a major multi-vehicle accident nearby. All the victims are being rushed to us. I can't handle a large number of casualties alone." And with both ORs prepped and the car closed, the man hurried back to the clinic. People needed him. It was already the second day the doctor was on his feet, and it was unknown when it would be over. 21 people were admitted to the hospital. Of course, not everyone made it to the operating room. And as they say, thank God, most of the nurses made bandages and determined in the wards. When the doctor arrived and changed his clothes and entered the operating room number 2, he saw a woman on the table. And when he looked at her face, he cried out in surprise. In front of him lay William's spouse, Kelly. He diagnosed several internal injuries, severe concussions, and a very bruised face. Without wasting a second, the vests went to work. 3 long hours the doctor labored, and during this time stopped internal bleeding, did surgery on his leg, removed all the shrapnel from his face. But to be honest, it was even more frightening. It was clear to everyone that if she survived, plastic surgery would be required after recovery. At 5 o'clock, it was all over. 3 could not be saved. They died on the operating tables with injuries incompatible with life. Corver couldn't feel his legs or his back. And when he came out of surgery, William was waiting for him. "I operated on your wife." "What do you mean you operated on her?" "She was in a car accident." Forgetting his fatigue, he flew to the emergency room. Even with bandages and a disfigured face, he recognized his Kelly. The man couldn't hold back the tears. He loved his Kelly more than anything in the world. 18 years of married life, 2 beautiful boys, and love still. He looked at the gauges. While everything was working, his wife was unconscious. Kelly, love. How on earth did this happen? He asked, knowing no one would answer him. The driver of the truck didn't slow down on a curve, and the huge truck skidded. It flipped over and crushed several cars, leaving no chance for whoever was behind the wheel. Kelly was already in the driveway of the clinic, sitting relaxed, listening to music, and didn't even have time to react and slow down. As it turned out, on the hood, drinking out the windshield. The last thing she heard was the chords of a waltz, and then darkness and silence. William Peterson gingerly touched his arm, but he didn't even turn around. "William Peterson, get some sleep. I've put you in the study." "No, I can't leave her." "Don't worry, I'm fine." But finally, realizing that he was tired to the point where he could pass out at any minute, he agreed to go lie down. When he woke up 6 hours later, he scolded the nurse for not waking him up. "So your wife's still unconscious. How can you help her?" I was surprised to hear the nurse justify herself. "Yes, I guess you're right. Make some coffee, please." Well, she brought him coffee and a couple of homemade cakes, which the doctor swallowed without even noticing. "Maybe you should go home. Kelly's alive. If you need a consult, we'll be in touch." And to everyone's surprise, he agreed. Taking his bag, he left the hospital, which felt heavy with an atmosphere of despair and human suffering. Of course, the doctors kept the situation under control, but they were unable to give any comforting information to the relatives of the victims, who came to the clinic and now looked at the people in white coats with tear-wet eyes, pleading. There remained a swift wait. William Peterson showered at home, then called the clinic a couple of times in half an hour, but always heard the same answer. No change. Alive. The man put the cell phone down on the table and directed a blank stare at it. Suddenly, the phone rang, making the man flinch. William grabbed the gadget, but his son's name popped up on the screen. "Dad, you're all right," he spoke, in a slightly worried voice. "Yeah, Mom, I can't get through." "Where are you?" In a quiet, scary voice, Dad asked. "At the Institute. I'm going home. We'll find a mom and get together. Come to our place. I have something to tell you." When the children heard about the accident, the daughter's eyes widened with horror and instantly filled with tears. "She'll live." Barely audible, the girl whispered, "I can't say for sure, but we have to believe it. The doctors did everything they could. Her condition is stable, but she's not conscious. Now she has to want to come back to us. That's the only way her body will fight back." And he dialed the clinic again. "How's the Catalan doing?" "William Peterson. She's still unconscious." They answered him on the other end of the line. "In our case, we should be glad. At least her condition isn't getting worse," said William, disconnecting the phone. "But trust, of course, we'll be better off." The medical staff watched Kelly Makarova closely until the morning, but she never moved. Her breathing was shallow and infrequent, and her pulse was weak but steady. Consciousness never returned, and William Peterson began to fear the worst of the coma. By evening, he was back in the clinic and ready to start work. After the second operation came to an end, Corver went straight to the intensive care unit. But the nurse could do nothing to cheer him up. Unfortunately, there was no improvement, but no deterioration either, she said. She hated that William was moving away from the operating table like a man possessed. He walked into the resident's room. Couldn't be alone and the best among men. "Let me make you some coffee," the nurse offered, and the man nodded silently. Maria's daughter had put something in his bag that morning. As it turned out, it was sandwiches and 2 apples. He had no appetite, but he ate, realizing that he needed strength to work. Unable to find a place to sit, he went to the emergency room again. For a while, the man stood near his wife's bed, not allowing a close look with the device, and then lifted the eyelid of the right eye. But it was unchanged. Then he put a chair beside the bed, sat down, and took her dainty hand in his big soft palm and said, "To be honest, Kelly, I don't remember how long ago I told you how much I love you. Yes, I do. And I also couldn't do it without you. You should come back, stop sleeping. But you're not a sleeping princess. You're an energetic, creative person. I need you. Me and the kids need you. We miss you very much. Maria, without you, is hitting the sweet spot again, and only you can stop her." He ran his thumb along the inside of her palm. The hand warmed, as if life was being rekindled in it. But Kelly didn't react in any way to his touch. She just doesn't want to come back here, William thought, to the place where she'd been hurt. Dr. Corver should know about such things. In order to escape from pain and suffering, victims go so deeply into themselves that it can be difficult or impossible to come back. 3 more long days passed. William Peterson settled into the clinic. He could no longer tell if it was day or night. He spent all his time either in the operating room or in the intensive care unit. And now he was sitting across from her again, gazing into that dear, once beautiful face. But now she's not vital. Kissing her hands and talking about everything. William was just about to be, despairing, and suddenly felt her hand move. Not much, just a little bit, but it moved. So she can hear him, even though her eyes are still closed. "Good girl, honey, it's me, Will. Can you hear me? If you burned my finger. And oh my goodness." She squeezed. Oh, not so hard, my dear, you'll break it once." He laughed. "I adore you, my love. I await your return. Try to open your eyes. I know you want to see me too." Oh, I tried to lift her eyelids, but it didn't work right away because she had to return to this world as her husband asked her to. The pain immediately pierced her, and she wanted to go back to where it was quiet and nothing hurt. William Peterson realized that it hurt too much to comply with his request. Nina quickly anesthetized the painkiller. "I'm on my way." William Peterson. After the medicine took effect, she opened her eyes and saw this strong man crying. "I'm glad you're back with me. You're a fighter. I've always known that. Everything's gonna be okay now. I promise." William was always not only the soul of the company, but also in the family. He was the center of the universe. He could always make you laugh, encourage you, give you hope. For this he was loved, respected and trusted not only by his colleagues, but also by his wife and children. Children. How do they quietly ask Kelly? They're worried, they want to see you. I want to see them too. Later, my dear, they will surely come. And the car's pretty wrecked. Yeah, forget about that piece of iron. The main thing is that you're alive and you'll be well soon. I'm sleepy. Sure, go to sleep, dear. I'll come back later. And when he walked into the resident's room with a smile at all 32, everyone present realized what had happened. She's back with us. Thank you. And he shook his hand wider than that. A few more times he looked in on his wife, but she was asleep. It was only toward evening that Kelly opened her eyes again. Hi, he said. I'm glad you're back with me. She made an attempt to smile back at him, but immediately grimaced in pain. How do you feel the same? He asked, realizing it was a very stupid question. She wanted to nod, but looked up again in pain. Head. You have a severe concussion and a small hematoma on the right side. He could see the anguish in her eyes. I understand, Kelly, you are in a lot of pain, said the husband sympathetically. They're going to give you some painkillers and you'll feel better. He stood up, walked over to the nurse and said half the usual dose. Let him stay awake longer. The nurse nodded and went to the patient. In the evening, William Peterson went home. He had to check on the children, even though they were adults, but still the children were more already asleep, and he kissed her hand. I'll be back in the morning, sweetheart. Kelly, I heard his words, but to open my eyes was no longer strong. It was hard to escape the morphine. And in the morning, when she woke up, she was surprised to find that her husband was beside her and smiling, looking at her with loving eyes. Good morning. Oh, darling. Hello. He understood her lips rather than heard them. You look much better today, he said. The woman didn't know what was wrong with her face. And William had no idea how to let me know about it. By the way, the kids are coming to visit you tomorrow. William changed the subject. They'd had a long, hard conversation yesterday. The man explained that Mom still has to endure several plastic surgeries, that her face is disfigured. But you must not give the impression you are future doctors. You know that the patient in any case should be supported, gives you hope. It's clear, don't worry, everything will be fine. They endured, and the father was proud of his children. But once Maria got outside the hospital, she got really hysterical. Did you see that? She screamed. Yes, I'm even afraid to imagine Mom's condition when she sees herself in the mirror. Calmed his sister down as best he could. A month passed. The hematoma dissolved. Her head also ached. The cast on her arm was removed. The wound on her leg was gradually healing, but her face. It was the first time she realized there was something wrong with it. When her hands were free to touch her cheek, she looked at her husband in horror. What's wrong with my face? Hearing this question, William Peterson grimaced as if in great pain. Kelly started. It was he to choose the right words, but the woman interrupted him. The mirror, she commanded. I don't have one. Then bring it to me. A mirror now, shouted the woman. Honey, you're not alone here. This is a hospital, not a beauty parlor. You got it. I'm sorry, she came to her senses a little and realized she'd overdone it. William didn't stop by until just before she went home. I gotta go. I'll be on the second shift tomorrow. I'll be there at 3 o'clock for tea. And he turned for the door, not even a goodbye kiss. He came back and was already bending down to kiss her when he heard her. Don't be. I know perfectly well you're disgusted. What's this nonsense? I'll try to sleep at night. And this can all be fixed. I'd like to remind you that a lot of people aren't as lucky as you. And now they're living in a cemetery forever. And you're throwing a tantrum because of your looks. Good night, darling. And he left the room. But I apologized. She shouted after her husband, but still felt as if someone's invisible cold hand had squeezed her heart. She couldn't sleep for a long time, thinking about her husband, about the plastic surgery. Now she was ashamed of her behavior. It was essentially not her spouse's fault. William seemed an endless period that it took Kelly to finally come to her senses. It became especially hard morally when she was transferred from the intensive care unit to the ward. She lay in a separate room and refused to go out into the corridor, so, as the woman put it, not to frighten the patients with her appearance. Recently, she saw herself in the mirror, and it was a real shock. And now it was discharge day. The doctor informed her that all the procedures were finished and Kelly could go home. She still limped a little, but it was a matter of time. The only thing Kelly was concerned about at the moment was plastic surgery. She knew several plastic surgeons already, and she had even written down the contacts of one of them. A friend had recommended it, arguing that everyone who went to him was very satisfied with the result. "Kelly, you should have seen him," Betty said, rolling her eyes dreamily. "I've never seen such a handsome man before. I mean, Alain Delon's a bit of a dud, but I don't think men should be so handsome. Maybe that's why he's in her memory when she gets home, and she'll contact him if he agrees. Wouldn't hesitate to go for counseling." After lunch, William came to pick her up, helped her pack her things, put her in a chair, and took her to her car. At home, her children were waiting for her at the festive table, and she wanted to lie down, but she could not offend her favorite children. After all, she understood how hard they tried. Lunch smoothly passed into dinner, and she, modestly saying that she was tired, went to the shower, after which she felt human. Later, William entered the bedroom. "Kelly, if you want, I can sleep in the other room for now." "Why?" "No, I miss you. Go back to your seat." He put out the light and put Yurka under the covers. "That's better. Or he'll lie down in the other room. She won't be so scared. And in general, be patient. Do the operation. Yes, I love you in every way. But I see how important it is to you, and I'm not talking you out of it. Don't save money on doctors. Pick the best one. Thanks, Vitrenko." She lay on his chest and immediately fell asleep. And when she woke up, there was no one home. The first thing she did was to call almost Alain Delon, but actually Simmons Ethan. But she could only talk to his secretary because, as the latter put it, Mr. Simmons was very busy and needed not only her. "How can you get me an appointment for counseling? Would he refuse to work with me?" Kelly wondered. Why would he refuse? The secretary didn't understand. "But my case is very complicated." "Well, just so you know, for Ethan, there are no complicated cases. He's the best. I know, that's why I want to discuss it with him. Consult in a week and discuss." "Okay, let's make it a week from now. What time is 11 o'clock okay?" "Yes, thank you, I will." A week before the consultation, I knew all about Simmons Kelly plastic surgery and the truth. Handsome, excellent specialist. But here's what really surprised her. He's single. Why would women overlook such a specimen? Kelly pondered. Very interesting. And on the appointed day at exactly 11 o'clock, Simmons took her to tell about the reasons that led to this appearance. Kelly waited for his verdict. The doctor examined every inch of her face long and meticulously. But even after such a close examination, he did not jump to conclusions. He looked through a magnifying glass for a long time, scrutinized every orb. Then he took the photograph and set the date of the operation in a month. Before that, to take all the tests. "Tell me honestly, Ethan, how much chance do I have of regaining my former beauty?" "I'll do everything I can." And he took another hard look at her face. They said goodbye to the doctor. She walked out in the hallway. Her phone rang. Looking at the screen, the woman smiled. It was William. "I just came out of the plastic surgeon's office. Surgery after a month. He promised to return everything back to the way it was." "I'm very happy for you, dear," for she was the only one who was silent for a second. "It's very expensive. We can pay for it. Don't even think about it. The money is my concern." And Kelly immediately calmed down. At home, Kelly surfed the internet every night looking for information about the Simmons. But all the reviews were positive. Probably somewhere in the back of her mind, she wished she could find something not so enthusiastic about the man. But it was all to no avail. Women all as one described what a professional he was in his work, and how after the operation their self-esteem returned to them. And one evening, while Kelly was lost at her laptop, her husband's voice echoed behind her. "Who's that handsome guy you're scrutinizing?" "It's not handsome. It's my plastic surgeon." In an even tone, she replied, "I'm just familiarizing myself with his work." And do you know what conclusion I came to? The husband looked at Kelly expectantly. If it's not Photoshop, then he really is a magician, does incredible things. And I really want to be on his operating table. But he doesn't like my test results. Well, I think you'll make it. William smiled, kissing his wife on the top of her head. The doctor knows what he's doing. I always respect a serious approach. Any self-respecting doctor would value two things: patience and reputation. And the next day, Kelly was contacted by Simmons' secretary and asked her to come in for a consult with the doctor. The repeat test results came back. The cab pulled up to the clinic at 9 o'clock, and she saw Ethan closing his car. It was the first time Kelly had seen him not in a robe, but in a perfectly fitting suit. The gray-colored shirt and tie that had always been an important accessory to a man's toilette caught her eye. Tied in a knot, working as a fashion designer, she'd been interested in that in her day, and hugging himself to the cab she was getting out of, he gave her a hand. "Good morning," he said, and graciously let her pass in front. Kelly appreciated the morning Ethan. She could smell the light and very pleasant scent of his toilet water. It was a scent that had mesmerized her even last time. Now it had become very familiar to her, as if it had accompanied her since long ago. She didn't stay long in the hallway. "Come in, Kelly." He had already changed into his usual snow-white robe, under which he wore the same snow-white t-shirt. He kept peering at her from head to toe, and noted to himself that the woman was quite interesting. "I have good news for you. The repeat tests are normal, and we can set a date for the surgery. But there's less good news. The surgery isn't for another 2 months. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I'm a little behind schedule." He saw her distress and rushed to reassure her. "Don't feel bad, Kelly. Deadlines are relative. 2 months is if you stick to the schedule. But there are always force major circumstances and patients ask to reschedule, in which case I can do your surgery sooner. Just be ready at a moment's notice." The man really wanted to cheer up this beautiful woman, so he suggested, "Maybe for a cup of coffee, there's a lovely cafe nearby. Aren't you in a hurry for another surgery?" Kelly wondered. "No. The last day of the month is report day. No surgeries are scheduled on those days. Let's go." But Kelly shook her head no. "You don't go out in public with a face like mine. You just spoil people's appetites. And to be perfectly frank, when I hear you say something like that, I feel like you're mocking me." "Not at all, Kelly." "Well, then it gets a lot worse. Goodbye. I'll look forward to hearing from your secretary." And she quickly left the office. 2 months, the woman pondered on her way out. That's an eternity. Maybe she should consider other doctors with less busy schedules. So once home, she started looking for other clinics. She liked 2 more. And the very next morning, she went to one of them. The doctor welcomed her warmly, examined her face at once, and offered to do the surgery the day after tomorrow. "But do I have time to take all the necessary tests?" asked a stunned woman. "Are you not feeling well?" surprised the doctor. "No, but then I see no reason for a thorough examination. Let's do a blood test for inflammation. Thank God we have our own lab. So we'll have the results in a couple hours, that's all." "So do we have a contract?" Kelly didn't say anything. Her inner voice told her that wasn't an option. The doctor's examination was not as thorough as Simmons. Didn't order any tests. And the surgery the day after tomorrow. It's all too soon. As William would say, not a serious approach. "You know, I decided to consult my husband again," she replied after a short thought. "Good," the doctor agreed, already with less enthusiasm. Next clinic. Kelly decided not to go. "No way," she said to herself. "I'll wait. It's better that way." A week later, Simon got a call from the clinic. "Kelly, doctor, I'd like to see you. Can you come down here, please?" A couple hours later, she was at the office. "Come in, Kelly. I can tell you something. The patient who was supposed to be in surgery the day before yesterday has unfortunately fallen ill. That's basically what I called the circumstances." He said something else, and she thought she was glad to be with this man. Ethan Simmons' great company, especially when there's good news. "Kelly, are you listening to me?" Yeah, sure. The surgery's the day after tomorrow. I honestly couldn't hear the rest. And then I'm gonna invite you back for coffee. Let's go and sit in an outdoor cafe. where it's less crowded and nature distracts from the attention to the customers. Well, okay, she put on again huge black glasses, lowered her bangs, tacks, and said, "I'm ready." Into his huge car she got in quickly so no one would see her. The car smelled of leather and toilet water. Passers-by and stores flashed outside the windows. She didn't even ask where he was taking her. It didn't matter to her now. They sped through the air while obeying the rules of the road. Once on the highway, the car picked up speed, but quickly came to a stop, reaching a scenic area. "I don't know why," Simmons muttered as he helped Kelly out of the car. "But this little cafe makes mind-blowing coffee. It's worth the drive so far out of town." They left the cars on the curb and took the outermost table. And Kelly sat with her back to all the customers, even though there were only two, a couple in love who didn't need anyone but themselves. "Are you comfortable?" "Yes, very nice and relaxed. I just have to make sure. Is the coffee really that good?" "You bet." The coffee was indeed excellent, and they drank 2 cups each. Then a brownie, which Kelly couldn't refuse. And then the conversation, which dragged on, and there was no desire to rush anywhere, only to listen. They felt they were becoming more than doctor and patient to each other. It was both joyful and frightening at the same time. Will and the children were waiting for her at home. And the next day at 9 o'clock in the morning, William Peterson drove his wife. Cosmetology went to the clinic. "I myself want to look at the doctor, in whose hands I give my treasure," smiling, said William. He did not go into details that he made inquiries about this clinic. The reviews about Simmons were indeed good, but he wanted to have a look at the clinic itself. Inside, everything was respectable. The secretary is a pretty girl in a short robe. Everything was as it should be. Ethan walked towards them. "Good morning, Kelly." "Morning. I'd like you to meet my husband, William Corver. Your colleagues. He's a top-notch surgeon." Simmons extended his hand. "Pleased to meet you." William nodded, noting the handshake. Why did his heart sound like that? What could have alerted him to this man? The man didn't understand. Kelly calm. "What about him?" "Thank you, Will. I'll take it from here." If possible, William turned to Simon. "It's better to use a local anesthetic. She's been under a general recently after major surgery, and her heart is not a fiery engine." "I'll take it under advisement," Ethan replied. "How can you do that?" "Give me a call." William asked and kissed her. Ethan watched the whole thing. "He loves you," he said softly as the door closed behind him. "I love him too. He's a wonderful man. And as I said, a surgeon by God." "Okay, Kelly will show you to your room now. Surgery's scheduled for 11 o'clock. I already told you we're not going to get everything done today. It's too big a lesion, so don't expect me to take the bandages off in a couple hours and you'll go to your surgeon. Just be patient." "Okay, I got it." At exactly 11 o'clock, they came to pick her up and escort her to the operating room. It was a small, clean, and bright room with all sorts of equipment and instruments. Dr. Simmons was already there. "Help the patient to lie down on this table," he asked the nurse. And when she lay down, wearing a mask, "I'll check. Ready?" "I think so," the woman replied, and he nodded to the anesthesiologist. The local anesthetic was slowly starting to take effect, and Kelly stopped feeling her body. From the shoulder up, she couldn't feel her head, as if it didn't even exist. The bright, shadowy lights of the operating room were shining directly into her eyes. The doctor bent over her so low that she could see the color of his eyes and his smoothly shaven and shaven face. His eyes looked confident and she felt at ease. Everything was going well. Talking to her, he spoke to her. "Don't worry, everything will be fine. Just be patient a little longer. I think that's enough for today." Talking to her, he did not stop his work for a moment. His hands were plowing in front of his eyes, and she was interested in watching him. The operation lasted 3 hours. "Sleep on your back. Everybody rest." And she was wheeled to her room. And he sat up again. It was more work than Ethan had anticipated. But this was an unusual case. It's not just chin or eyelids. There really was jewelry work here. The next morning, he visited Kelly in her room. "How are you feeling?" "Sleepy. Then get some rest. When's the next surgery?" "But the plan is 5 days from now." "But it depends on how you feel." He left the room and she was asleep. William called in the evening and they had a little chat about her well-being and the children. 5 days later, Ethan began the next phase. Kelly wasn't nervous this time because she knew what was going to happen. The feeling was familiar, and she looked up at him and saw his smiling eyes. "I see you're not scared at all. That's wonderful. You've survived one day in particular. Today is the second. You probably don't know why these days are special, do you? Well, I'll tell you because together we've taken a step toward a new face without scars and terrible cuts." She saw his eyes smile and covered her own. When she opened them, she was already lying in the room. Touching her hands gingerly, bandages, sank back into sleep. And in the morning, Simmons visited her again. "How are you doing?" Kelly's face was mined, but her eyes, looking through the snaps of the bandages, smiled. And she gave him a thumbs up. He smiled back. "Be quicker this time. We'll continue until the day after tomorrow you'll rest. And then we'll make you beautiful. And this is for you, my employee put in the vase brought red rose for your excellent behavior in the operating room." One small step at a time. And William was inching closer to the day that would become Kelly's 3rd birthday. As soon as he arrived at the clinic, the first thing he did after putting on his gown was to rush to his patient's room. Like a magician pulling a flower out of his sleeve and giving it to her. He didn't like her very much today. She seemed a little sluggish. "How are you feeling?" The doctor asked. "Yesterday I was fine, but at night. And at night I felt cold. I think I had a fever. Did you inform the nurse about it?" "No, she hadn't gotten to me yet." "I had a fever, but a slight one." This infection scared Kelly. "I don't think so, but it's worth monitoring." She was wheeled into the OR in a wheelchair. All the stitches were clean. There was no inflammation at the surgical site. And Simmons breathed a sigh of relief. "Are you in any pain?" he asked. "No, nothing. Just a slight fever. Let's wait and see. I'll stay at the clinic today to make you feel better. Or maybe you should call your husband." Kelly offered shyly. "Don't you trust me?" "Well, if I didn't, I probably wouldn't be lying here." "Well, that's great. I think you're overly stressed. Stress can also cause a fever." So he asked the nurse to take the patient to her room when he came in after lunch. She was asleep. Ethan sat up for a while beside her. Her breathing was even. He touched her hands. They were warm. He had a circumferential facelift surgery today. He had to get ready, and he so hated to leave her. But work came first. It had taken him 45 years of his life since birth to become Ethan Simmons, a man admired by women and envied by other surgeons. But men admired him too. It was worth getting to know him. He had many friends among women and men. If he was an enemy to anyone, it was a ruthless one, because circumstances forced him to be so. But even those who envied and hated him could not deny him respect for his golden hands. He was a strong man, ready to fight to the end for what he believed in, and never abandoned his friends. His character was complex, and not everyone could stand him. That's probably why he reached such heights. Ethan's appearance was as impeccable as his reputation as a plastic surgeon. Tall, slender, gorgeous black hair, and with blue eyes that could radiate love and steel, depending on the circumstances. A slight unpleasantness conveyed his appearance and already sexy look. Unmarried. He was only because no woman could stand his work rhythm and the presence of so many beautiful ladies at work. To achieve what he had now, he had had to work hard and sacrifice his family. Kelly was therefore understandable. She looked like so many other women at Simmons with adoration. For today, he almost doubted himself. The temperature of his favorite patient confused him. The man was already ready for surgery when a nurse helped him lie down on the operating table. Another patient. An hour and a half later, he returned to Kelly. She had just opened her eyes. "How are you feeling now?" "I think better," she answered in a slightly hoarse voice. He was on his way out of the room when Oli's phone rang. "Will, hello." "Hello, my love. How are you doing?" "Yeah, it's going slow." "Don't worry, guys. We're fine. Can I visit you?" "Honey, I miss you." "No, Will, I'm in a state where there's nothing to see." "I'll meet you at home." "All right, what do you say?" She thought he was offended. But she still felt very bad, so she didn't want to upset him. In the evening, Simmons visited her again. He never went home and took her temperature, which was almost normal. They talked for a long time, both marveling at how pleasant each other's company was to them. They turned out to be very different, but it was all the more interesting to talk. He left her around midnight. "Good night," the doctor said. "I'll come and see you in the morning before I leave." "I'll be waiting," she replied and fell asleep with a smile on her lips. And when he came in the morning, she was very surprised. "Are you without a flower today?" she asked. "I see you're in a good mood." "Yes, without a flower. Tomorrow there will be a bouquet for that. Let's change the temperature." "I already measured it. It's normal." "But to be honest, you scared me, Kelly. I thought I'd become a lousy surgeon." "You call yourself a compliment." "Well, a word of endearment goes a long way with a cat." "No, I'm sorry, the cat. You're an excellent surgeon, Ethan. That's why I'm here." Thank you. You've put me at ease." And he leaned over and kissed her hand. Today was Kelly Makarova's last surgery. She's been tired for the past 2 months. The woman had undergone 5 surgeries, short and long, but each one brought her closer to her new appearance. She didn't see herself in the mirror and only believed the doctor's words. "Everything is going beautifully. I am satisfied," he told Kelly. One day, William himself called Simmons and, introducing himself, asked permission to visit his wife. "I won't be long, I promise. I've only heard her voice for a month and a half. Do you miss her?" And there was a note of jealousy in his question. "Is it allowed or not?" William inquired, letting it pass his ears. Not exactly the doctor's correct question. "Of course, come in. I'll leave a pass for you." The nurse kindly escorted him to Kelly's room. "Hello, darling." "William, how did you get in here?" "My pass." "How are you?" "It's all tied up for now, but the doctor says it's going well, and he's pleased with the result. But the important thing is that it's pretty." "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. You don't know how much I want to go home." "Why not?" "I do very well. We all miss you." "I miss you too." He completely forgot about the flowers he brought her, put out fruit, her favorite chocolate. "How's work going for you?" "What, maybe I have a new one, saving people every day, every hour." Sometimes I get the impression that people don't like themselves at all and don't value their health. How many people end up in the clinic because of their own stupidity? It's amazing. All this time he held her hand and stroked her palm with his thumb. She thought he had more gray hair and looked a little tired. "Are you from home?" "No, I'm after night duty and 2 night surgeries. I've noticed that I'm not pretty." "No, you're always handsome, even after night duty." He kissed her hand. "When the doctor gives you a prescription." He says first I said we'd take the bandages off, and then we'd see what happened. William would have loved to sit and talk to her some more, but he promised not for long. "I'm going to go. Kelly will call you tonight. Love you. Thanks for stopping by. It was good to see you." He put the bouquet in a vase where a white rose was already standing. The husband didn't ask where it came from. He didn't want to embarrass his wife, and he was pleased to realize that his wife liked other men, but no more than that. And in the evening, William called to say good night. Simmons came later, and they talked again until midnight. "We'll be saying goodbye soon, but you can always call me if anything goes wrong." "Well, if you count on that, I'll never call you," Kelly smiled. "Thank you. It's my pleasure. Can I just call you for a chat? It's a deal." A week later, she was invited to the dressing rooms. "Have a seat, Kelly. We're going to remove the bandages." When all the bandages had been thrown in the hamper, he scrutinized every inch of her face, like a sculptor forming new contours. "You know, I'm very pleased with my work. It couldn't have been done better. Quickly hand me the mirror." Kelly's voice was clearly impatient. "Kelly, I warn you, the face is still in the revitalization stage. There's some swelling and some beauty, but it will pass with time. A lot of work has been done. You just have to be patient for a little while longer. At your follow-up appointment in 2 weeks, you'll have your stitches removed. They'll be visible for a while too. But again, it's only temporary. Trust me, you heard me." "Yes," hesitantly, she said. Only then did he hand her the mirror. When she saw her face, she looked at him and tears flowed. I don't know what you are satisfied with seeing this nightmare. But there's nothing left for me to do. How can I believe you again? The tears rolled like peas. And she couldn't even contain herself. When can I go home? Well, we'll observe you for a week. She interrupted him. 3 days, I'm gone. He didn't want to break up with her, but he realized that he wouldn't be able to keep her for the rest of his life anyway. So he said okay. All 3 days she lay facing the wall. And when he came in, he talked to her back. After 3 days, the swelling had gone down considerably, which made Kelly very happy. But the beauty still held. The night before, she called her husband to tell him she was being discharged. Can you pick me up? Just not first thing in the morning. 12 o'clock would be fine. No, I want to leave early. Okay, I'll call a cab. I'll meet you at home. In the morning, she packed her bag, checked all the drawers to make sure she hadn't forgotten anything, and headed for Simmons' office. Ethan, I called a cab. I'm leaving for home in 15 minutes. Okay, hold on. It won't be long before the discharge papers are ready. He handed her a document. I wish you a healthy Kelly. And don't ever come back to us again. Thank you for everything you've done for me. The woman didn't expect him to hug her, and she sighed again. The same delicious perfume enveloping her in his car. Give me your bag. I'll walk you to the cab. When they left the clinic, the car was already waiting for her. Opening the door, he helped her in and waved her in, but happy. It was the last day of the month. He had paperwork to do, as usual, and there was a lot of work piling up, but he didn't feel like doing anything. I've gone home, he told the nurse. We have 2 surgeries tomorrow. Okay, Ethan. The man drove home in a terrible mood. He missed her already and berated himself for not giving her a ride home himself. When Kelly got home, there was a return apartment waiting for her, dinner prepared. Both kids hadn't gone to the institute, getting ready to see their mom. She was happy to see them, cradling them in her arms. They became quite grown up, but most importantly, the children were healthy. Why did God send me such happiness? Looking at them, Kelly said. Lunch turned into dinner, and the family gathered around the table and couldn't get enough of talking. William was happy to see the whole family together. No one was paying attention to Kelly's face, and she had forgotten what it had been like to see her own reflection in the mirror. The children scattered to their rooms, and William talked to Kelly about everything. When the house was quiet, she sat at the table and enjoyed the comforts of home. And in the morning it was getting late. William closed the windows with curtains to keep the sunlight out of his eyes. Thus, he hoped to prolong his wife's sleep, but alas, the day was coming with the noise of cars, sunlight, and the voices of the boys in the kitchen. A little lower. In bed, she got up without putting on her robe, and Kelly wandered around the apartment in her nightgown, enjoying the freedom. Taking a mirror in hand, the woman, carefully impersonating a doctor, examined her face. The swelling was almost gone. There was only a little bit left to beauty. Of course, a great transformation was visible. Now it was even scary to remember what had happened to her face. She was knocking back her coffee when the phone rang. Looking at the display, she saw that it was Betty. How are you doing? Are you beautiful already? Or did the doctor's office not live up to expectations? Hello, Betty. No, the doctor is wonderful. Everyone loves him, and I'm one of them now. He's very competent, and I believe every word he says. I feel great. Thank you for the advice to go to him. And what kind of handsome man did you appreciate? Yeah, he's an interesting man. I can't argue with that, but your will is just as good. So you're the envy of the world. I guess you're right about that when you're supposed to shoot in 2 weeks. Great, so we'll set up a meeting later. Everyone can't wait to see you refreshed. I agree. I miss you guys too. 2 weeks went by fast. Kelly rested, regained her strength, and waited for a call from the clinic. Hello, Kelly. This is the Simmons Clinic. It would be convenient for you to arrive at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Why not in the morning? Ethan has a surgery, and then he'll take care of you. Okay. I'll be there. Simmons purposely rescheduled the surgery for the morning so he could take care of Kelly and then take her out to a coffee shop or restaurant to celebrate the successful completion of the surgery. He tried to dial her phone number 14 times in 14 days and then put it off. Speaking of himself, He said he could not interfere in a family where the husband loved his wife so much. It was visible to the naked eye, but he was drawn to her like a magnet, helped by work, and he forgot for a while. Tonight he would finally see her. At exactly 200 hours, she knocked on his office door. "May I?" Yeah, come on in, Kelly. How are you feeling?" Fine. Let's go to the OR." While he put on his gown, mask, gloves. The nurse helped Kelly change and lay on the table. Everything was already familiar, the light of his face quite close and the lights in his blue hair. There was going to be a little complaining. A little unpleasant, bear with me. There will be a feeling of skin tightness afterward. The slight discomfort will pass quickly and you will be a beauty in a month. All this he told her without stopping working for a moment. When he was done, the nurse nodded and she did her part. "You can all get up now," he said to Kelly. The nurse helped and walked out of the operating room. "Kelly, do you have any urgent matters to attend to?" asked the doctor without looking at her. "No, I'm completely free." "Then let me invite you to celebrate the end of our collaboration." "I agree," Kelly replied immediately. "Feel free to go to the restaurant. And you won't be embarrassed with me," she smiled. "Of course not." "Well, then I'm not ashamed either." At the restaurant, they took the farthest table. "Kelly, you look so beautiful, and that suit looks great on you." "Thank you." Offering her hair, the woman replied. It was lunchtime, so it was time to eat. "What can I get you?" he asked. "I want a lot of vegetables too." "That's fine. Then I'll have the veal with vegetables too. You can have some wine if you like." "I'd support you too, but I'm driving." "All right then, red dry." "I'm flying to London on Monday, Kelly. I'm going to a conference for plastic surgeons. There's always a lot of interesting stuff there. I took pictures of you and 2 of my other patients. I'll be bragging. Let me know how it goes. Do you really wonder?" Ethan looked at her in surprise. "Of course I'm curious if they like my picture." Ethan laughed. "I can tell you right now that they'll like it." Glancing at her watch, she exclaimed to Ethan, "I have to go." "Okay, I'll give you a ride." He showed the waiter. He paid for his lunch and, pushing Kelly's chair away from the table, helped her up. He took the longest way to her house. "Well, here we are," she said with regret in her voice. "Thank you again for bringing me back to life." Simmons opened the car door and helped her out and said goodbye. She looked after his car and waved. A month and a half later, they met at a conference of surgeons, but already in Russia. There was a plenary session, and then the surgeons went to their sections. They bumped into each other at the entrance to the hall. "Hello, Kelly," and he shook hands with Vitaly Peterson. "How are you feeling?" "Fine. But I'll be fine soon." "And you're interested in surgery now?" "Yes, I often accompany my husband to such events." "That's commendable." And he let her go on ahead into the room. The Orlovsky spouses sat somewhere in the middle of the hall, and Ethan had a short speech at the plenary session and a large, detailed one at the plastic surgeons section. He had to talk about a trip to England. A month later, Kelly went to work. All the sick leave at her own expense was over. She missed her favorite job and the people she had spent 9 years of her life with. Kelly was a good fashion designer. Her success as a fashion designer was determined by her personal qualities. She wasn't afraid to say "I don't know," and she loved to learn. Her innate artistic taste, imagination, and flexibility of thought helped her in sketching. She was an innovator. She listened attentively to fashion trends. She was fond of new technologies. The woman did not like to work with ready-made sketches, which were created by designers. She did everything herself. In her models, you could feel the hand of a professional. I adore her chosen field. And every time she looked forward to the upcoming fashion show, she could already see their models being sold out in the stores. Whatever she did at work, she loved it. She was passionate about her work. But when she looked at herself in the mirror, she remembered her doctor, and her heart began to beat in a purified rhythm. Kelly considered herself a happy mother and a loving wife, was perfectly content with life and her marriage of almost 20 years. Those years, from the moment she married Vitaly, flew by like a blink of an eye. Very quickly, they became weather parents. Therefore, for 6 years, the young mother was engaged with the children and the house, and it suited her quite well. Household chores never seemed burdensome to her. She was never annoyed by the need to drive and transport her children from daycare. Now that the children were grown, she could do the things she loved to do. But it bothered her to think about Dr. Simmons too often. He missed her dearly, too. He would go to model shows and see her there, always passing the bouquet through someone, but never leaving a note. Yeah, he didn't need one. Kelly knew who the gift was from. Started looking for him with her eyes, but she couldn't find him. She tried to call him a few times, but something stopped her. They met again at the fundraiser and ran into each other in the check room. "Good evening," Simmons said. "Didn't you and I often find ourselves looking at Ethan, then Kelly?" William inquired. "I prefer to do it more often," Ethan replied. He tilted his head slightly. Kelly watched them from the side. He was tall, slender, each handsome in their own way and both excellent surgeons. "Will, what are you doing? Doesn't he have a right to be at this party? Who do you think you are?" "No, he's just not looking at you like a doctor." "Well, that's right. He's not my doctor anymore." "Don't be ridiculous. You're hurting my feelings." Ethan tried to keep out of the guy's sight, but as fate would have it, they kept running into each other at meetings and conferences. It was like she was testing them on purpose, making their hearts beat faster and blood rush at a frightening rate. They'd almost bumped heads once in a restaurant. Ethan glanced over at Kelly and with a nod, made his way to the table where a lady was waiting for him. Why did Kelly's mood immediately sour? Why did she find the woman so unworthy? Ethan, asking herself these questions, she didn't even try to answer them. And so a year passed. The Simmons Clinic flourished. He was even forced to take on an assistant to a promising young surgeon. At once it became easier, and he wished he had done it sooner. For the spring model show, he showed up with the same lady. He was afraid that if he was alone, he wouldn't stand for it and would approach Kelly. But he realized he had no right to do that, and she looked backstage and searched for him with her eyes. And finally, she found him. He was sitting directly across from the model's exit, and Kelly saw the same lady next to him. No sooner had she pouted her lips than a bouquet was brought to her. Again without a note, but again she didn't need one. The woman already knew everything. She quickly grabbed her phone before she changed her mind and dialed a single word. "Thank you." She watched him from backstage. He opened the message, smiled, and hid the phone. But the smile, she thought, was sad. It had been a year and a half since the surgery. Looking at her face, she thought it had always been like that. That morning, she was getting ready for work and putting on light makeup. It was quiet. The kids were getting ready for the institute, and Maria Mom's sudden shout of "Where's my wallet?" made Kelly startled. Her hand trembled, and she scratched a piece of skin on her face with her fingernail. Clamping the wound with an alcohol-soaked cotton pad, she hailed a cab and drove to the clinic. Simmons they met in the hallway. Something was wrong. She put the disc away. She got the disc. "I accidentally nicked it with my fingernail. And I don't think I'm worried. Now get dressed and let's go to the OR. I had to put in a neat little stitch. It's no big deal. It's uncomfortable, but it's not fatal. Don't worry. You'll have to wear a Band-Aid. Come back in 2 days. I'll take a look. You can get up now. You write the bill. I'll pay everything." He nodded and went into the office. When she came in after him, he turned sharply to her and said, "I've missed you, Kelly, and I've wanted to see you all the time. I missed the look of your voice, the smell of you." He continued to say something, making her lose herself in reality. "I can't do it without you. I've tried, but it doesn't work. I missed our conversations too." He wrapped his arms around her, and she didn't want to push him away. Ethan. It felt like if he broke the embrace now, he'd miss her forever. "I've tried to stay away from you, but it's not working. I love you, Kelly," he whispered, looking into her beautiful eyes. "I probably love you too." Even more quietly, the woman said, and he put all the tenderness and love he had for her into his kiss, and she responded with just as much desire. Now they were doing what they had forbidden themselves to do for a year and a half. Perhaps their time had come. It was a derangement of reason. Obsession, mad infatuation, obsession, passion. You could call it all sorts of things. But they didn't linger now. Nothing needed to be said. They felt everything. After a year and a half apart, Ethan and Kelly became lovers. "Ethan, hi. I finally got you on the phone. How are you? Better now. Do you want me to fly up to you? I'd love to. I need someone to share it with, someone to talk to. I'm wandering around the house like a ghost. Aren't you working? No, I'm working now. Otherwise, I'd probably go crazy. Okay, I'll call you as soon as I get the tickets. I'll be really looking forward to seeing you. Thomas was a childhood friend, the one and only for life. At first, they had lived near each other, gone to the same kindergarten, then sat at the same desk at school and fought off the local bullies together. They went to college together. Although Thomas didn't really want to go to medical school, he decided to go with his friend. 6 years at the institute brought the boys even closer together. His friend did not work as a doctor, but organized his own clinic, where excellent specialists worked. He turned out to be a great organizer and administrator, and the inheritance left by his parents helped in opening the clinic. He had to weigh a lot of things, think, plan, calculate what it will cost him this or that project, and whether the game is worth the candle. And so far, he hasn't been wrong. He had a gut feeling, which did not deceive him. True, the friends were now far apart. Ethan in New York, David in Toronto, but the distance did not prevent the friends from socializing and meeting more often at the earliest opportunity. Thomas was in New York on business. Ethan, having extensive acquaintances and connections, helped his friend to solve unsolvable problems. Thomas had a family, 2 beautiful daughters and a son. His wife worked at his clinic. There were no outbursts of jealousy because, unlike Ethan, Thomas dealt with paperwork and his wife didn't see it as a threat to her marriage. And Ethan was alone again. And at the thought of her, the man's heart clenched. Many women wanted to be near the successful man, but the place really belonged to Kelly alone. Of course, so did Thomas, but in another sense, he had no operations today. But Ethan got up at 700 am anyway, washed and cleaned up, and called the clinic. Everything's in place, he asked. Are you ready for surgery? Yeah, we're good. Ethan is ready and everything is in place. Call me if anything goes wrong. Okay, cell phone rings, it's a house. He bought it for her to live here, to breathe the forest air, to swim in the small, clean river in the summer. And now this house he hated. It was empty and cold without Oli in it. Ethan hadn't felt so happy in years. And never in his life had there been a woman like Kelly, beautiful, exciting. Simmons fell in love with her as soon as he saw her. And they didn't even know each other. She's a patient, a married woman with 2 grown children. He's a doctor, but once they talked, they both realized they were attracted to each other. Ethan admired her ability to look both sexy and elegant at the same time. He was pleased to realize that such an interesting woman was in love with him. Kelly, on the other hand, thought that everything that happened between them was a special atmosphere. The doctor saves the patient and gives her back her beautiful face. Kelly wanted to believe in what was happening between them. She wanted to believe that everything that was happening, that what was going on between them was sincere. She had never had another man in her life other than her husband, and he was the only one she felt the most important relationship with. Competing with William was difficult. Even a very handsome, reliable, intelligent, and charming man. He loved his Kalinka as he had the first day they met. But Ethan had turned everything in her mind upside down. They had always been good together. This woman was to him the embodiment of everything a man could dream of in his life. Kelly was his fairy tale princess, not only beautiful, but also smart seductive. All in all, the best. They were crazy about each other. She gave Ethan that special state of mind that made him want to move mountains. They enjoyed each other's company. He had never imagined he would be so happy with just her presence. Ethan would never forget the time spent with her. In the evening, Thomas called again. I leave tomorrow at 8 p.m. I've got the number. Tell me I'll meet you, but it'll be at night. Yeah, I don't care, I don't sleep. I'd rather meet you. Okay, well, whatever you need me to do to get there myself. Now Ethan slept only before the operation, taking sleeping pills to make him sleepy in the evening. Today, he was on his way to meet a friend. He was glad to see him. It was quite dark outside when he drove out of the house. It was still about 40 minutes until Thomas arrived, and he was excited to walk around the lounge. Looking at his watch, he heard the airplane. When he looked at his watch, he heard that the Toronto-New York plane had landed at the airport. Ethan hadn't seen Thomas yet, but he was already smiling. But it's taking a long time. Our friend didn't come out for a long time. Both Ethan and Ethan craned their necks, looking for him. "You'll be looking for me for a long time." There was a familiar voice behind me. Ethan turned around, looking at you with all his eyes. "Well, hello, friend. It's good to see you," and they hugged. "I hope you didn't come for 2 days," Ethan asked hopefully, looking at Thomas. 2 weeks. Great. It was said sincerely because Ethan understood how hard it was for his friend to get away, to leave his family and job, and devote 2 weeks to a friend. You don't look good," Thomas concluded. "Be thankful I'm still alive. And to be honest, I still don't believe that what happened to me was real." Talking, they quickly reached the house. "This is quite a palace," Thomas said when he saw the mansion. "It's not too big for you. It is bigger even for my family. I want to sell it and buy an apartment near the office so I can walk to work." "That's a great idea, Mr. Plastic Surgeon." While Thomas showered, Ethan prepared a simple breakfast. Ethan made a simple breakfast, and they sat across from each other, drinking coffee and wrinkling their faces at the pleasant smell of the beverage. "You go get some rest. I'll go to the clinic." "Rest up, Thomas. It's a deal." His friend fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Ethan stopped by the clinic, where he hadn't been for 2 days. But things were going on as usual. Everyone was in place, and everyone was busy doing their own thing. It was literally half an hour. He drove back. On the way, he bought good cognac, meat, cheese, caviar. And when he entered the house, there was silence. Thomas was still asleep. He took care of the meat. He battered it well, roasted it a little on both sides, and put it in the oven. He made sandwiches, sliced sausage and cheese, turned on the TV quietly, and waited for him to come down. About an hour later, Thomas came down a little backed up with bangs of black hair. It brought back memories of sleeping over at each other's houses as kids and getting up in the morning. Exactly the same way. "Your place is so quiet, so peaceful." "It's quiet in my house. Only at night, when everyone's quiet." "That's beautiful, Thomas. Family's important." "How long have you known that?" "I've always known it. The thing is, not all the women could compete with my work. They always thought I loved them less." "What do you think?" "They were right. I guess I've got the meat ready. I'm not much of a cook, so I didn't try anything fancy. I just did the basics. But you're good. I can't even do that," grinned my friend. "That's how we live. But you like it, don't you?" "Yes, but when I get tired, I have a place to run away for 2 weeks. It's harder for my wife. She doesn't have a friend like that." Ethan was smiling. It was like he was alive, and the house didn't seem blind to him anymore. They went into the dining room, and he put his arm around his friend's shoulders. It was a rather spacious room furnished with furniture in soft stock colors. On the walls hung paintings with appropriately themed reproductions. Looking at the paintings, Thomas asked. Ethan nodded. There was a large Kiev palm tree in the corner, and the dining room window overlooked the garden. But there were tempting aromas coming from the table, and the men felt hungry. "And you have a very cozy and clean place with someone helping you." The man nodded and pointed Thomas to the table. Ethan couldn't start a conversation about himself, and Thomas didn't rush him. They had been sitting for over an hour, sipping cognac. They took their time, reminiscing a lot. Ethan even laughed, something he hadn't done in 4 months. There was a deep crease between his eyebrows, and his hair was graying. He spoke suddenly, and Thomas prepared himself to listen. It was an important quality in a man. He never interrupted, but was patient and tried to see the situation from the outside. He avoided hasty, judgmental assessments. This created a favorable atmosphere for conversation. Now I know for sure that fate does not like those who have everything. Ethan glanced over at Thomas. I realized this to the fullest extent when yesterday I was a successful businessman and the best surgeon. A full house and, most importantly, a loving, beloved woman. Turns out, what I used to think was love was a big mistake. Can you believe it? I only knew true love with her. With this incredible woman. Why didn't you marry her? Taking advantage of the pause, Thomas asked. 365 times a year, I asked her to be my wife, and 365 times she gave me reasons to postpone it. The children are still in school. If I left, they might drop out. Then the kids had to get jobs. Then my daughter had her first love. Then my husband had a promotion. I had to support him. And so on for almost all 6 years. We dreamed with her about how we would live together, where we would spend our vacations. She tossed herself between her husband and me. It was easier for me. I'm a man, I'm free. She was married. A loving mother. I understood all that and was content to see her. Did your husband guess about your relationship? Ethan answered this question not immediately. There was such silence in the house that one could hear the huge floor clock ticking in Ethan's study. But a hurricane was raging in the man's soul. He was reliving the tragedy all over again. I think he guessed. He even came to my clinic. We had a very long talk. Quietly, calmly, and let Kelly decide for herself. But she didn't come to me right after our first explanation and our one kiss. She disappeared for 2 months. She didn't even come back for the shock. Then I found out that William had done it himself. I had no right to rush her, realizing how hard it was for her to decide. On one side of the scales of 20 years of married life, 2 children, and a loving husband, and on the other a love affair that flared up. Perhaps she was expecting that this love that flared up so quickly would extinguish even more quickly. But it didn't, and one day she came to me on her own. Can you imagine that day and hour I remembered for the rest of my life? To give his friend a break from the heavy memories, Thomas raised a shot glass. Ethan, let's drink to your happy future. It's impossible without her, he said, in a shaky voice. Anything is possible in life, and they drank. The bottle of cognac was long since empty, and both men were completely sober. The first time she called me If was when she burst into my apartment after 2 months away. If, I can't be without you. She said it then. I've tried, but I can't do it. And she hugged me. At that moment, I was the happiest person in the world. She stayed with me until late afternoon and went home. I didn't want to let her go. You can't imagine. I loved everything about her. I adored her. I didn't even realize you could love each other so passionately. I could hardly concentrate on my work. I enjoyed giving her gifts. To fulfill her every whim, and she didn't want much. You know the song, "There's a sweetheart around." That's the one. A year went by like that, but nothing changed. We used every minute to be together. We didn't know how to handle it. Kelly thought it would all work out in time, but time passed. The knot was getting tighter and tighter, and she couldn't find a solution. I loved her so much that I was ready to let her go when I saw her suffering. But she wouldn't even hear of it. I can't be without you, Ethan. I need you. So move in with me, and it'll be easier for everyone to put an end to this. That's when she started crying. I know, she'd interrupt me, but I can't do this right away. I have a life. Kelly, I mean right away, it's been almost 2 years. She'd start crying again, and I couldn't stand her tears, and I'd immediately apologize for pushing her. As he was saying this, he didn't notice the mountain of torn paper napkins that lay beside him. He was tearing them with fury. Thomas didn't touch him, realizing the man needed to vent his negativity. And all your dreams of living together remained a dream. He asked. Yes, they were. It didn't work out. We kept seeing each other every spare minute. I bought this house for her to be more outdoors, to relax, but she always thought about her children, who also arranged her scandals and expressed their discontent. And after another domestic scandal, she disappeared again for 2 months. I called her to see if everything was all right. Yes, she replied in her iron voice, I was fine. I remember that night I got drunker than ever. On principle, alcohol is the anesthesia that allows you to undergo the operation called life. I didn't want to live, but I didn't make any claims against her, realizing she was having a harder time than I was. After a couple weeks, I started to let go, and I was working like crazy. It saved me a lot. I took on the most complicated surgeries at the time when I was so stressed, and I had a great result. I was surprised myself, but the patients were very satisfied. Their conversation was interrupted by a phone call. Ethan, you can come to the clinic right away. Something's happened. Yes, there's something wrong with a patient here. Okay, I'll be right there. He washed and cleaned up, called a cab. Thomas, watch TV. Give me a break. I'll be right back. But Thomas decided to look around the house. It took him an hour. He went into Ethan's study. It was in perfect order. Only a few white sheets and a pen were out of order. They were poems. Even Thomas didn't know that Ethan's writing on poems was them again. As he read through the outline, he realized that he had truly loved this woman and had suffered a tragedy. Ethan came back a couple hours later. Did you get everything sorted out? Yeah, thank God they managed without me. Ethan, I'm sorry, but I've been reading your poems, and I love them. They convey your pain, the depth of the tragedy you've suffered. I didn't know you had a talent for it. It's true what they say. A talented man is talented at everything. But Ethan waved his hand and let's go and buy you some real Indian tea, given by a grateful husband, and they both laughed. For some time they were silently enjoying the aroma of the drink. Ethan suddenly asked his friend, "Tell me, how can I go on living? Nothing pleases me. Not even my once favorite job. Ethan, everything passes. It will pass and this time heals. Your soul hurts. All you have to do is wait." So what happened next? Thomas asked. 2 months later she came again. She looked awful. "You don't feel well?" I asked her. "Yes," she replied. "I don't feel well without you." "Then stay." She nodded and stayed. In the morning we had breakfast and felt almost like a family. All the 5+ years we've been seeing each other whenever we had the chance. I think back now and wonder how we managed it. But I guess these things happen. I lived from her leaving to her returning to me, and marveled that a year had passed. Then 2, 3, 4. We were good together. But even then, she found reasons to wait a little longer. I didn't consider those reasons to be reasons. It was more like an excuse not to change anything. I had given up all hope of seeing her around as a wife, but 5 years passed, and one day she came to me with a suitcase. When I opened the door to her, I stood like a stumbling block, and she threw the suitcase, hugged me, pressing her nose against my neck. And she was crying quietly. "Why are you crying?" "For joy. Because I decided to take this step, and you're there for me." We talked all night. She told me that William quietly let her go, saying that the sacrifices she was trying to make to save her family were of no use to anyone. Everyone had figured it out a long time ago. But you know this, he told her. "If you need my help, call me right away." So the point was finally made. And we started living together. She never filed for divorce. I was never meant to be her husband. I made her quit her job. She looked terrible. She couldn't sleep at night. Walked around the house like a ghost. But after 2 or 3 months, she calmed down. She slept again, had an appetite. I hired a cook so she wouldn't cook, but rest. He cooked delicacies for her 6 months later. My beloved came to life, ran up to me. And that's when I decided it was happiness. She was a beacon for me, a guiding star, a light in the window. And I knew it would always be that way, no matter what happened. 8 months of happiness, taking a 2-week vacation. She and I flew to Paris, spent unforgettable days in the city of love. She chose where to go, what to see. But I would have been happy even if we were in a hotel room. We went to the movies, walked around Paris, talked about everything that came to mind. And sometimes we would just sit next to each other and be silent. Feeling perfectly happy, we could talk about literature, painting, fashion, theater. She was a versatile person, and I was surprised to find that she knew as much about painting as she did about fashion. We could talk about our parents, about childhood dreams and youthful desires, and the beginning of adulthood and careers. We were never bored. Women I knew, looking at us, would often say to me later, "What do you see in her? She pales next to you." And I wondered how they couldn't see the beauty of this goddess. She was beautiful. She was absolutely made for me. And then I realized that any even divine perfection causes envy and irritation in mere mortals. So I smiled condescendingly and in a minute forgot what they were talking about. Why has fate treated me so unfairly? Ethan asked Thomas, "Why isn't she here? And I'm sitting here drinking cognac with you. It wasn't supposed to be like this." His friend sat looking at him, and thinking how much was still a very deep wound, too fresh for him to think about anything but his loss. The thought of living and enjoying life, Ethan found sacrilegious. Life is such a thing, you never know what's around the corner. Thomas said, knowing full well that it was a poor consolation. As for Ethan himself, he was not relieved by this conversation. On the contrary, he felt infinitely lonely, neglected, unwanted. And Thomas seriously doubted whether Ethan would ever be able to forget his beloved woman. Not even to forget, and at least to stop feeding you for her departure and live with hindsight. He won't be able to let another one into his heart for a long time. After 8 months, I began to notice that something was happening to her. To all my questions, she said she had a slight headache. I looked at the pills she was taking. They were painkillers. Sometimes at night, she'd sit in the living room and watch TV, even though it hadn't been on for a long time. "Kelly, are you feeling sick?" "No, just insomnia." "How's your headache?" Then she started to look better and even had some fun. But after 2 months, her condition worsened dramatically. She held her head and said the pills didn't help. "Should we go to the clinic?" "No, I'm not going. It'll pass now." But I saw that her condition was terrible, and this time I didn't give in. I took her by the hand, and no matter how much she resisted, put her in the car and drove her to the paid clinic. Her complexion, as we drove, had turned a sort of gray, and she looked as if she had aged. I realized, something terrible is happening. "Yeah, I don't need help. I don't need the clinic," she assured me. "Kelly, do this for me so I can rest assured that nothing terrible is happening to you." "Okay, but this is the last time I'm not going to any more clinics. I've had enough of those hospitals." God, I asked then. Only if she was all right, although deep down I was prepared to hear the worst. Even mentally, I was already thinking about what lies I would tell Ola if she was found to have a terrible disease. But God did not hear me because the tests were disappointing. The brain tumor was not opera. "You came too late," the doctor told me, "at least a couple months earlier, and now it's too late. You're a doctor, you can see for yourself. I'm taking her to Germany, to Israel, where they can help. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it's useless. Before you torture your wife, send those test results and you'll get an answer. I'm 200% sure it will be the same. Again, I'm sorry. Okay, not the surgery. But it's possible to prolong her life. If not stop, at least slow down the progression of the disease. Let's start the treatment, the medicine, the money, it's all there. Of course, we are not refusing treatment, but you must be ready at any moment. The tumor's too deep, there's a lot of blood vessels. We're not gods either, and we can't do everything yet." The doctor said regretfully. Kelly was admitted to the clinic. I sent her tests to every clinic in the world. In Germany, they refused immediately. In Israel, they gave me hope at first, but then they refused. So I called my friend in the States, asked him to find out everything, sent the tests. They told him to let him come, but we can't give any guarantees. The disease is neglected. Then I called Vitaly and asked to meet him. He only specified where and when. We met in the park, we looked at each other without anger, but we didn't give each other a hand. "Kelly is dying," I said, and he immediately turned pale. "What's wrong?" "Brain tumor." Gleb Plastum immediately asked him. "Yes, all the clinics refused to take her. The tumor's not for. You can see the MRI results. I brought them with me at the time, and when he saw them, he cried. We both lost her. The treatment did nothing. And 2 months later, my snail was gone. I still can't believe it, that it's gone. It may sound cliché, but death is hard to get used to, especially since she suffered so much. A terrible death," Thomas said quietly. "For the first month, I didn't know what to do. I felt like a ship without a helmsman, doomed to sail the seas forever and not docked on any shore. I told you fate doesn't like those who have everything. That's why it was taken from me," and covering his face with his hands, Ethan sobbed like a child. Thomas sat there unable to utter a word. He was crushed by the story and didn't know how to help his friend. It was as if Ethan had read his mind. "Don't worry, Thomas. I could have told you all that. So back to life. She's not alive, but I am alive, though I think it's unfair. if, in the opinion of those who knew our history, she did not deserve heaven. At least let her find peace, Ithan said. Will you be happy? Thomas took his hand. Probably, but not for a while.